All right. So here we are, Monday, July 26th. This is starting the project, part 5. And what we've got to cover today is to establish project governance structure and plan and manage the project phase closure. We've got our topics today, which will be to establish the governance structure. Here's my little contribution to help people keep focus with me. I know a lot of times we get stuck on how many slides we have sometimes, and this could be good, could be bad. I'm going to give you guys a heads up if you promise to stay with us, okay, and stay engaged. So this is a back and forth. This is two-way. So my contribution to you is this first part will be 14 slides. Part B is to plan and manage the project phase and closure. It's going to be 20 slides. There's only 35 slides today. So there's no cheering. There should be cheering in the background. So that's 35 slides. We're probably going to finish early, but what I want to focus on is take advantage of that time. I do have some questions and some things for us to talk about at the end, just to fill a little bit of that time. I don't want to finish too early, but I don't mind finishing early. But let's stay engaged, please. Let's get some two-way dialogue going today. Talk about some experiences, get some questions. All right, where am I at here? All right, the business processes that will be involved. So you look at 4.4, 4.5, and those types of things, right? Those are when you go back to your PMBOK. These are the areas that we're talking about today. And what I did was I provided the page number that these sections begin in. So today we're going to be dealing with areas that are part of Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of the PMBOK, 6th edition. Everyone knows, by the way, that if you're a member of the PMI member, the 7th is available for you. But I think everyone is saying to stick with the 6th right now while you get through your PMP prep work. Stay with that because that's what everything's based on right now. But 4.4 is the managing project knowledge. 4.5, monitor and control project work. Perform integrated change control is 4.6. 4.7, close project phase. 5.5 is validate scope. So here we go. Organizations use governance guidelines to establish strategic direction and performance parameters. The strategic direction provides the purpose, expectations, goals, and actions to guide business pursuits and is aligned with business objectives. Project management activities should be and must stay aligned with the business direction to increase project success. You know, we've heard things. I did an expert lecture series in April this year. And part of the thing that's interesting is we talk about how the roles of a project manager has changed over time from when I took the test, when Heather took the test, to where you guys are taking the test now. The role of a project manager has changed and much more business-centric in your mindset now. So when we talk about these things where project management activities should be and must stay aligned with business direction to increase project success, that's on purpose. Those are the expectations that business leaders have of us now. So it's something, you know, to take away here. So enablers, deliverables, and tools, right? We've got enablers of determining appropriate appropriate governance for a project and defining the escalation paths and thresholds. Deliverables, to create a project team, identify governance structure, project change, and configuration control. Tools, we're going to be using meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and more meetings. We'll leverage organizational process assets, OPAs, OPAs, and project management information systems, PMIS, and then we're going to be updating documents. When you look at project governance, so project governance is the framework, the function, and the processes that guide project management activities in order to create the definition of a project, a unique product, service, or result to meet organizational, strategic, and operational goals. It's a comprehensive methodology that provides oversight on the project lifecycle for the organization and ensures its success. Provides the structure, processes, decision-making models, and tools for the project manager and team to manage the project. So let's take a look at the framework. This is from the PMBOK guide. Components of the governance framework include the project success and deliverable acceptance criteria, process to identify, escalate, and resolve issues, the relationship between project team, the organizational groups, and external stakeholders, project org chart with project roles, communication processes and procedures, processes for project decision-making, guidelines for aligning project governance and organizational strategy, project lifecycle approach, process for stage gate or phase reviews, process for review and approval of changes above the project manager's authority, and process to align internal stakeholders with process requirements. Anyone want to chime in on why this stuff might be important? I mean, what happens if we don't have this? Anyone chime in, please? This is you don't get extra points, you don't get in trouble if you don't, but what happens if we don't have this?
You lose structure.
And I'd also like to...
You lose structure in working on a project where you can pretty much bend just about every rule, and so it kind of loses its integrity.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Who else is speaking as well, please?
So I have two in the chat. You don't have a clear plan. Projects may never close. Lack of unity and direction on the project.
That's great. That's really great stuff. So do you think this applies to predictive or agile or both? I mean, what do you think there?
Both.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody want to challenge that, please? It's okay to. Okay. Thank you, everybody. By the way, I appreciate your participation. Let's keep it up. Let's keep it up. Don't count slides. I told you how many there were, but let's stay with me here, okay? That was my contribution. You guys are helping me back, so don't get ahead on me.
William, somebody also added that it's both, but they may look different.
Ah.
Exactly.
Okay, no, I like that. I like that. That was a great contribution. I appreciate that one. Good. Anything else, please? Good. Great, thank you. So let's look at project phases. So project can be divided into phases that represent activities that produce one or more deliverables. Project phase is a collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the completion of one or more deliverables. The output of one phase is often a handoff or input to the next phase. Phases facilitate management, planning, control as the work is represented in small and more focused segments. My contribution to this would be Six Sigma. Anyone on here Six Sigma? Certified, green belt, yellow belt, white belt, whatever belts we got now, black belt. Anybody familiar with DMAIC? D-M-A-I-C. And I think even if you're certified in change control, Prosky has I forgot what that one's called, but Prosky has another acronym as well that represents phases. And it's just groups of activities, right? And when we think about it, the reason why I asked the question right of that familiarity is when we think about it, we immediately begin to think in our minds, well, what's required to go from one phase, put them in blocks, sequential blocks, what's required maybe to go from one block to the next? And when you start thinking that way, you start thinking, okay, well, logically, there must be some requirements that have to be met. Well, there must be some approvals that are required. Well, there must be some things that need to be done before you end one phase, get into the next phase and start it, right? So those are the types of things that I want to look at, that this is going to be talking about. So again, project phases produce one or more deliverables. It can be performed sequentially or can overlap, and outputs from one phase are generally inputs of the next phase. I gotta quit using my scroll. So applying governance to the project lifecycle. At the beginning of each phase, it's a good practice to verify and validate the former assumptions made to the project, analyze risks, and explain in detail the processes required to achieve a phase's deliverables. After the key deliverables of a project of a particular phase are produced, a review at the end of the phase is necessary to ensure completeness and acceptance. So let's think about that again. So what we said at the beginning of a phase, verify and validate the former assumptions made to the project are still accurate. You could also, at the end of the phase, make sure that things are as you expect them to be, right? So you're looking at, based on the end of this phase, and before we get to the next phase, let's have a review. Are things still the same? Still things what we expect them to be, right? Follow your governance processes and determine, are we still on the right path? Are we still in the right direction? Do we need to call some audibles? Do we need to make some changes? Where are we at with this, right? So this is applying that governance to the project life cycle, from phase to phase to phase. Complete the phase, analyze the phase, and see what you have. While you get starting with the next one, you want to kind of verify and evaluate that your assumptions to this point are still accurate. Have risks changed? Do we need to close the project? A phase can be closed or project terminated when huge risks are involved for the project and when objectives are no longer required. Are there any more contributions to that? Heather, of course, you have complete freedom as well. If you find anything that you'd like to chime in on, please feel to do so as well. Okay. Now here's a graphical representation that might help us. I'm a picture guy, and I'll tell you that all day long. So a phase gate. I should have asked you guys what phase gates were before we even got going here. So phase gates is a review at the end of the phase in which a decision is made to continue to the next phase, to continue with modification, or to end a project or program. So a phase gate is also known as a governance gate, a toll gate, or kill point, and is a review at the end of a phase in which a decision is made to continue to the next phase or not. Each review is used to check if each phase has fulfilled the exit criteria and is eligible to move to the next phase. These criteria serve as thresholds for the project to continue. The advantage of this approach is that the project is controlled by incremental decisions based on information rather than one big decision based on speculation. The disadvantage of this approach is that it may create the impression that the project team keeps approaching management for assistance or for assurance, approval, and support. So let's think about this from do we have any more? I can't see hands. I'm not paying attention to anything except my screen here, but anyone familiar with the Six Sigma, with DMAIC, or, those types of things, DMADV?
So there are a number of people who do have green belts.
Great.
But I can add a little color to just the gates itself. So if anybody does any technology projects and uses the PMO framework here at AT&T, there are decision gates. So, and it used to be the decision gates used to be leadership meetings, and now they're just voting structures. But we have, internally, we use a program called TMAT, and all those gates are automated with that. So just to add a flavor. And what it does is it aligns and makes sure everybody is ready to move to the next phase, just like William has said.
Yeah. Good one. That's a good one. PMAT. Are there any other examples of where where some of the resources on the call here might use decision gates or kill points or phase gates or whatever you want to call it? We use them with, and I keep saying the Six Sigma part, but we use them with Six Sigma very intentionally, right? Six Sigma is the step where you go and you try to reduce defects in order to improve your throughput, improve an output, improve quality. Each phase along the way, these are big changes. So there's things along the way that you're literally identifying what's wrong, you're defining what's wrong. You have no idea why there's such a defect. Every phase along the way is intentional and building up and establishing opportunities to say, you know what, nope, we're not going to go. There's no need to go anymore. We're okay, or whatever the deal is. But it was very intentional. These are intentional. These aren't passive things. These are things that happen. These are like Heather had mentioned. These are votes, whether it be on a phone call or it be through a system like a PMIS, like PMAT, or we use email and calls to get through some things as well. But they're very active. They're intentional, and there are very clearly defined owners and who approves to continue or stop. Any more contribution to this, Lee?
Yeah, William, Jessica added that it is used for securing funding.
That's perfect. That's a great reason to have a decision gate. Golly, especially for folks that manage that budget. That's a great contribution, man. That's really, really great. That's also a great example of why they may say, you know what, we've got other things. I mean, we have all, in our time at AT&T, have come across opportunities where priorities have changed. What you are working on is not as important as something else, and they had to pull some funding back. And now we need to reprioritize those funds. You need to push your project to next year or next quarter while we work on this. So hold on for a little bit, right? I've certainly seen that. I would imagine most of us on the call have seen that, experienced that.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Okay. So face-to-face relationships. This is one of those things where, definitions can become somewhat obvious, right? So sequential relationships contain consecutive phases that start only when the previous phase is completed. Now, I started to think to myself, and Heather, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I started to think, well, this is really finish to finish or finish to start relationship, right? You can't start one until you finish the other one. But I've seen questions that ask for both. So from the perspective of a phase, it is sequential relationship. From the perspective of an activity, of a task, it's finish to start to finish, where you want to go, right? So that's something that I've tried to clarify in my mind as well as I'm working through this, right? This relationship reduces the level of uncertainty, which may eliminate the option for shortening the project schedule. Overlapping relationships contain phases that start prior to the previous phase ending. This relationship increases the level of risk and may cause rework if something from the previous phase directly affects the next phase. Okay. So guidelines go ahead, please. Thank you.
I think a good example of that is like if you have funding or you're in the process of going through a gate to get funding and they haven't voted yet, and you start talking to the technical people. You're sort of overlapping and talking to the technical people before funding. So I think that's an example of overlapping. And sequential would be you get the funding and then you talk to the technical people. Mm-hmm. Would you agree, William?
That's a great example.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. I like that. And you can see the level of risk would be, right, whenever if you're waiting, right, this is what they're talking about, that if you're, in Heather's example, that if you're waiting, the sequential relationship, if you wait, you have no risk. You're waiting for the funding before you even start talking to people, which maybe they're counting their hours or their time. But if you've got the opportunity to get, maybe there's a level of confidence that you have with the funding coming through. So, we're able to go ahead and get this, right? This is a high priority, high profile project. It's going to be fine. We'll go ahead. But in the event that something, again, gets pulled back or reprioritized for whatever reason, the risk that you have is they've spent time working on, I don't know, design or architecture, working on something. That would be the risk that you have there. So that's a great example, Heather. Thank you for that. Any other contribution, please, to the sequential and overlapping relationships? Anybody not understand those terms, please? Okay. So the guidelines to determine appropriate governance for a project. I'll get rid of this thing on my screen here. I think I can. Do that. Oh, that's the wrong one. Projects often have several phases, and it's important that they be planned and executed in an efficient manner. So here's some guidelines to determine the appropriate governance for a project. So you want to involve the organization's decision managers, who are frequently its senior managers. Who are those that make the decisions? And keep them engaged, involved. Choose the most appropriate governance goals and try to keep them simple. Select a group of experienced individuals who are responsible for all governance activities. Practice governance for projects, programs, and portfolios. Keep the governance process transparent to the project stakeholders. Nothing to hide, right? Just keep it transparent. Remember that the governance is an evolutionary process and take advantage of the lessons you have learned during it. So, based on the dynamics of the project, based on the negotiations you have with your client sponsors or your decision makers and just the phases that are going to be part of the project, just clearly define and be transparent with, your governance process expectations. So let's take a look at some questions here, okay? Heather, if you're following along, these are things that are not in the PowerPoint. I added these. Hopefully add some value here. So this is one of those things where you just tell us what the answer is. It's going to be ugly on a conference call with 70, 80 people, but it's okay. That's the fun part of it, because Heather and I get to hear what the majority of the responses are, okay? So someone's getting ahead of the time, getting ahead of us. So which of the following best represents the definition of governance? Number one, a set of practices to help assure the success of the project. Do you think that's it? Or do you think it's a phase-to-phase relationship within a project? Or do you think the PMO directive on managing the project? Or do you think the sponsor's directive on managing the project? What do we got? Number one, number two, number three, number four?
Number one.
Okay, anybody challenge that, please? I've seen all of them. I've seen the last three. I've seen number one. I've seen A and B. I've seen two. Okay. I appreciate the responses. Thank you for being engaged. The answer is number one. So here's a little secret too, right? When you think about this, and I'll ask some folks that have recently taken the PMP exam, but generally, when you sit down for this exam, they'll tell you, choose all that apply, or choose three, choose this. They'll be very specific in choosing multiples. Pay attention to the question, but this would be an example where they're asking, what is the best one? Which of the following? So it is a set of practices to help assure the success of the project, and it is on page 44 in your PMBOK guide. How about another one? Question two. The decision to move from one phase to another is known as which of the following? Choose three. Kill point, go, no go, phase gate, phase endpoint, continuance threshold, governance gate. 1, 3, 6, I've seen. 1, 3, and 6. 1, 2, and 3, thank you. Nice. Okay. We're going to go one at a time here. There's three of them. First one. Kill point. All right, so the next one, phase gate. Final, governance gate. Everybody get them? Okay. Last question. Which of the following describes the most common phase-to-phase relationship in multi-phase projects? Finish to start, sequential, orderly, non-overlapping. So here's another little secret, right? Let's talk about what two can you get rid of based on what we talked about today. Which of the following describes the most common face-to-face relationship? What two did we not even talk about? Well, I talked about it, but I talked about it in a different context. There's two that we defined. Well, so it's probably one of those. So we're working through the process of elimination here to determine, okay, well, we can get rid of 2 opportunities for this response. So which one is it?
Bottom 2.
See a lot of.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the bottom.
That's right. Well, so I guess there was only one that we talked about, didn't we? There was only one.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So with that, here's your answer. We didn't even. Well, I talked about finish to start just because I was a question that I had in my mind. That's what sequential feels like to me. But in a face-to-face relationship, it's sequential. Orderly, we didn't even talk about. Non-overlapping, we didn't talk about. It would be sequential. The other opportunity was overlapping. Sequential and overlapping were the 2 face-to-face relationships that we talked about for multi-phase projects. This is on page 42 to 44 in your PMBOK. The one that we talked about with the definition of moving from one phase to another, which of the following. This is on page 21 in the PMBOK. Okay. What questions do we have? Any questions? Anything for clarification that Heather or I could help you with? Everybody gets that when you have a multi-phase, and that's defined at the very beginning of your project. You're going to define this. When you have a multi-phase project, process, call it, there are deliverables that have to be met. They're predefined deliverables that have to be met. At the end of that phase, you get approvals that I meet all the metrics and all the requirements of each phase. Let's go back to that cool diagram so phase 1 completes. You've got all of your metrics. You've got all your deliverables. You've got everything taken care of. That's part of your checklist. It's done. You just need to verify it. You need to present it, and it goes to a gate. And at this gate, you're getting in front of your client sponsors or the folks that are making the decisions that says that if you can proceed, do you kill it? Or maybe you modify going forward. You modify what your original plan was to go forward. So you present what's going on. You present your assumptions. You present everything going on. You get a decision. Whatever that decision is, again, you either proceed, you modify what you plan to do, or you stop and end the project. Right? Then you go to the next phase. Do the same thing. Any questions, please? I don't want to oversimplify. We all know that what we do, we do a lot of stuff, a lot of little stuff, a lot of really important little stuff that adds up to, successfully completing a project. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about this not necessarily as A, B, and C, but as the relationship of things occur. That's what we want to go in with the exam with. How does this stuff work? It helps you think through and reason through these questions, and you really understand what a project manager does. Okay. You don't need to go over the questions again. Here's what we're going to do. Then we're going to go to plan and manage the project phase closure. So closing a project or project phase is one of the last steps in completing a project or phase. Because a project is a unique one-time activity, the formal closing out of a project is essential. In some cases, without an official closeout of a project or phase, the next related activity, phase, or project will not get started. This happens often when there are multiple projects managed within a program. So your enablers are that you're determining the criteria to successfully close the project phase, develop transition planning artifacts, you validate readiness for transition, things like going to operation teams for the next phase. You conclude activities to close out the project or phase. Let's see your deliverables. These are related to the enablers addressed in the topic, and some of these might include, the definition of done, validation of work. No specific tools of this. It's just how do you define done, and was it accomplished, and can you validate it? Closed project or phase. The closed project or phase process is the process of finalizing all activities for the project, phase, or contract. During this process, all invoices are paid, contracts are closed, project lessons learned are discussed and documented, and other loose ends are wrapped up that the project is complete, and resources, which include people, equipment, facilities, and money, can be released to work on new projects or project phases. This process ensures that the activities across all project management process groups are finalized to signify the formal ending of the project work and the project or phase. So there's certain activities that occur during this closeout period. The planned work is completed, project or phase information is archived, the project team resources are released to pursue other endeavors. So any one of the following events can result in closure. The project or phase successfully met its completion objectives. The requirements change during execution to the point where the project is no longer feasible, or the adequate funding is no longer available to complete the requirements. The significant risks are encountered that make the successful completion of the project impossible, or the organization no longer needs the project deliverables. Any of these can result in closure. External factors arise that do away with the need for the project. For example, change in laws or regulations, merger or acquisition that affect the organizations, global or national economic changes. I would imagine with a lot of the corporate decisions that were made at AT&T over the past many years, there have probably been a lot of instances where, because of mergers or acquisitions, that the projects are impacted, right? The resources that are available for to work the projects, or who owns the project now? Is it us, or is it IBM? Or is it DirecTV, or how does that work? I mean, there's a lot of things that happen, and having those opportunities, those gates to discuss those types of things is really beneficial to, success of the company here. Any other contributions to this space, please? Okay. Good. So the closure procurements. Procurements are closed when the contract terms of a procurement has been satisfied by both the buyer and the seller. This occurs throughout the life of the project, not during project closure. Contracts are not kept open any longer than necessary to avoid erroneous or unintentional charges against the contract. Heather, is this anything that you deal with the budgeting, right? Do you deal with contracts as well, procurement, as part of your day-to-day?
Actually, yeah, we do work closely with contracts. And it can actually be pretty cumbersome, and it's really important to make sure you have a good partnership relationship with supply chain. For instance, we had entered into a contract, I think last year or the year before, to have a vendor put equipment into our network, and then we are no longer pursuing that, and so we're taking everything out. So that is one way to close the procurement, is actually decide we no longer want to do business with this person, or it may be a person, maybe they sell the company. That would be another way that you would have to close out the documents. So I hope that added something.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anyone else on the call that might have additional experience in this space? Okay. All right, so let's look at some things. Some acceptance. Project deliverables are deemed accepted when certain acceptance criteria have been met. These generally refer to some or all of the requirements that were established at the beginning of the project, and which might, right, as we go through the phases, maybe they're modified during the project's life cycle. Deliverables that meet these acceptance criteria are formally signed off and approved by the customer or sponsor. We have payments. Payments made to a supplier or vendor are made in accordance with the terms of the contract between the buyer and the supplier or vendor. Unless the contract is closed at the completion of a project or phase, payment will most likely have been made at the time of the contract closure. It should not be delayed until project or phase closure unless specified in the contract to avoid potential for accidental charges to the contract. I'm soaking on that for a second. Payments are made in accordance with the terms of the contract between the buyer and seller. Okay. So get the work done, get an invoice, get it paid, and you want to avoid any accidental charges to the contract. So that's kind of the big takeaway here. Is there any more? Let me ask right here, because this is kind of a really short. I mean, you're thinking about closing a phase, looking at procurement, looking at contracts. All right, the only thing it said was to close procurement, accept the deliverables that were met, make the payment. Right? I don't want to oversimplify that, but I know there's other areas in the PMBOK where you guys are going to spend a whole lot more time, if you haven't already, a whole lot more time talking about, you know, contracts and what kind of contracts and how to determine what kind of contract is the best, those types of things. This is really closing out the project. Okay, so here's an interesting thing that I think a lot of us formally forget, but I think we do it just as a byproduct of probably shouldn't do that again. And it's normally in a negative context, but let's talk about knowledge management. Knowledge management during project or phase closure consists of finalizing the lessons learned register, which is compiled throughout the project lifecycle. This document should be added to the lessons learned repository, which is a database of lessons learned from multiple projects. I don't know that AT&T, at least I'm not aware of anything that AT&T has that's formally labeled the lessons learned repository. I think every organization, maybe at the VP level, maybe at the director level, hell, maybe at the AM level, depending upon how many resources are available. But, you know, we have a place where we do things. Maybe it's our own program where we have it. But just for the purpose of PMP, there is a such thing as a lessons learned repository, and it's a store of historical information about lessons learned in projects. It's a place where all the lessons learned go to sit and to be referenced. So transition planning artifacts. Let me see, I hit something else here. Here's a sample. Oh, okay, we're gonna get there in a second, good, okay. So transition planning artifacts. As a project ready for the product to be in the hands of end users, coordination and strategy about how best to deliver and transition the product and other deliverables is needed. Projects that release and deploy deliverables in the most suitable manner ensures end user awareness and increases the proper usage and adoption of the outputs. Optimizing acceptance and usability includes preparation of artifacts such as training, documentation, communication, and support. So transition planning artifacts. Again, from a Six Sigma, to me, this is like sustain the gains kind of a thing. It's one of the terms that we use. You know, it's meant to prepare them for delivery, and so that they can handle the product, they can take the product and understand how the product works, understand what they need to be doing going forward. So what we're saying here is, when there's a situation where there's an upgrade or an improvement to an existing product or service, it's just a matter of making sure that they're aware of what's going on, how it gets used, and what's, the purpose going forward, and what modifications have been done. So you assess the readiness, you implement a plan. It's a formal plan. It says, hey, here's our handoff. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's your training and your documentation. Here's how you can contact us for follow-up and those types of things and support. And any questions with, or maybe examples of how transition planning artifacts, transition readiness. This is transitioning from the project, transitioning the product to the users, or the process to the users, or the service to the users. Heather, there was something that popped up on the screen. I didn't quite catch it. Was there a contribution to the space in chat?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I did, yeah.
Does it translate well in Agile? I would imagine, yeah. While you're working through, and maybe I'm going to admit here now, guys, that I'm not the strongest in Agile. That's not been my space. I'm more predictive, SME. But from an Agile perspective, I would imagine that as you're building up your product and you're completing your user stories and you're building your product in the Agile way, right? Building it piece by piece and deliverable by deliverable, you still have a handoff point. You still have to transition that product over, right? Someone can challenge me, but I would imagine that you still have that transition that needs to happen where there's documentation, there's training, there's communication, and support that's required. Anyone challenge that, please? Anybody here that works Agile every day? Maybe we can talk through it together. Software deployment, guys, come on.
Well,
Can anyone? Go ahead. Thank you.
I do Agile in for our PI sessions for making changes to our codes for our tools.
Mm-hmm. So after the code, so let's use that as an example because I'm saying more support that this is maybe more relative to predictive, and I'm not challenging that at all. But I'm saying how might this apply to Agile? And if it doesn't, I'm cool too. But even from Heather, from your perspective of doing a code update, I don't know. Some of maybe are there examples where you would have to say, okay, guys, look, here's what has changed. This is what you guys need to be paying attention to. This is different here. We need to make sure you guys are aware. Is that a thing in Agile?
I think so. I think so because, Agile really takes the waterfall process and breaks it down into, whatever sequence of cycles, whether it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks, however that works. And, you do need to ensure that all the parties are aligned, including the end users, the business, the resources, and the project teams to deliver and make sure you're ready for that Agile delivery.
So do you think it's possible that, and this is for the folks that are thinking that it's predictive only, do you think that in an Agile experience that maybe this just happens more often? Maybe it doesn't happen only at the end, which makes it feel very predictive, right? You're waiting for all the phases to complete, and then you're handing it off. I'm open for debate.
So William, I don't know if you want me to answer, but I do think it does. I think transition happens more often, and I think you're right. I think there's arguments on both sides that because it happens more often, you might get a better product.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it.
So here's some comments from Jessica, not so much the support teams. Kelly has added totally predictive, and Mona has said, I think it happens often since there's constant feedback.
Okay. Okay. I like it. Maybe there's not a right answer or a wrong answer. It's just one of those that at the end of the day, it's just making sure that the users of the product service understands what they're getting, and where the support functions are going to be. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Go ahead, please. Thanks.
Yeah, William, sorry. I just want to add, because Jessica says it seems like we are more focused on the customer. So in my mind, we do projects for the customer. So you're right. We specifically focus on the customer because that's why we have a project, to deliver something to the customer.
So we're suggesting that this is predictive because this has already been defined. This is just part of Agile. Is that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
Everybody has a different opinion.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes total sense to me. Okay. All right. Well, so lessons learned register. So at the end of a project, or not at the end of the project, so lessons learned register. At the end of the project, you've gathered all the relevant information about the work done in a project or project phase and documented it in the lessons learned register. It's important to include both. Oh, let's do this. I kind of gave it away though. It's important to include both what the project team did well and what they need to improve on. When the project is closed and the lessons learned register is complete, the register content needs to be added to the lessons learned repository so future project teams can benefit from this knowledge. Considerations of lessons learned. During the administrative closure, project managers should take into account some of the following considerations of lessons learned. Scheduling lessons learned include any relevant scheduling problem or issues. They also include the management strategies that were implemented to deal with scheduling or resource constraints. Okay, so there's one, scheduling lessons learned. Another one is conflict management lessons learned. Can include anything that arose with the team that arose within the team or between the team and customers. Perhaps a documentation of the nature and source of the conflict, as well as the impact of the conflict. It should also specify how management intervened in response to the conflict. Sellers' lessons learned include seller experience and the performance documented and provided to procurement department. Customer lessons learned can include useful information such as the customer that are excessively litigious or unreasonable to work with. This information should be conveyed to the sales and legal departments as well as documented in the lessons learned repository. That's an interesting one. Strategic lessons learned are those that typically impact some aspect of the organization's project management methodology or significantly improve a template, form, or process. These address the questions: can you reuse this project artifact to get more done with the same resources and or deliver work sooner? Tactical lessons learned answers the question: if you were to do this type of project again, what should you stop, start, and continue so that you can effectively execute flawlessly? They focus on developing the recommendations, reviewing recommendations with other managers and the departments, and then developing implementation plans and then implementing them. Other aspects of lessons learned include scope, schedule, cost, quality, and customer satisfaction, as well as any corrective action taken in response to issues. I think the important thing here is whenever I look at lessons learned, and I have a habit of doing this as well, it's important to note the stuff that they're calling it, or their improvement opportunities or developmental areas. But it's also a good idea to improve what went well, right? But I've got examples where, by creating a very certain template or something that simplified someone's work, I was able to reduce their standard SLA, their cycle time, by 50%, just by saving them some time from having to look everywhere. I think that would be an important item to add to, I guess it would probably be more tactical lessons learned. But, here's something that we were able to do pretty simply. As a PM, we have access to the tool. It took me 15 minutes to save them 3 days of work. Not a big deal. I mean, that's something that we can replicate. I think I would imagine that there's a lot of times that we miss those positive lessons learned as well. Anybody have any contribution to lessons learned? Okay. All right. Keep going. So here's an example of a lessons learned template. So where did I get this? Well, I got it from PMI. I went to the projectmanagement.com, and you can find templates. And I just wanted to find something. And what I found whenever I was going through my PMP prep courses years ago, we talk about all these tools, we talk about all this stuff, but it's we never see what it looks like. Like what is the context of this lessons learned register? What is a real template that could be used? Now, this isn't something someone had just commented that they use something similar, not exactly this template from PMI, but they use something similar, which is 100% okay. It's just a matter of at least having a formal process to do that. So this one, looks at, is it a positive or a negative? What phase was it in? You can define these categories. I don't know. I'd have to look at the actual Excel template that they gave us. I would imagine these notes are probably definitions. That way you can replicate what's going on. But what was the problem? What was the impact that it had? And what's the recommendation going forward? You can use so many different things. Just whatever adds value, whatever you think will add value moving forward. The idea of this is that you'd be able to get it put into a place where you have it in a repository. And my own contribution to this is I would be interested in personally seeing what a repository looks like, because I would like to see, I would hope that it would be something that you could search with a query. I don't want to look through 150 different lessons learned logs to try to find something. It mitigates its point. It doesn't make any sense to me. It'd be interesting to know, and maybe someone on the call has experience with this. It'd be interested to know that if a lessons learned repository are generally set up in a manner that allows you to query your instance, query a group or query a customer, query something that's searchable, that you can say, oh, here's some things that adds value to me, right? I won't look through 100 different things. I mean, does anybody on the call have an experience with a repository that might help me?
So this is Heather. I know for our PMP projects internally, we always do a lessons learned, but you're bringing up a very good point. I don't know if it's a searchable repository. I think it's an artifact that is attached to each separate project. So I think you have a very valid point.
Hey, maybe a process improvement opportunity, huh? Yeah. Is there anyone on the? Thank you, Heather. Is there anyone on the call that has an experience with a lessons learned repository, or I don't care what the format is, it doesn't matter, that might be able to share how it's worked for you?
Hey, well, this is Larry Vasquez. I know that we've used T-Space as a repository for, knowledge of any sort, whether it's resources that one individual uses based on his experience, whether he put it together or not, or just having access to many links that can give you insight in anything that you're really looking into. I'm in the engineering organization, so that's helped us in the past, and we actually used it for that for some time.
That's great. Thank you, Larry. That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about T-Space. That's a great recommendation. Any more, please? That was a really great one. I hadn't thought about that. Anyone use SharePoint? I wonder why SharePoint wouldn't be something that, unless we're phasing out of it, anyone use SharePoint where you are able to add an item and you could probably even query off of that. Maybe you can query off of T-Space too.
Well, yeah, but
any other
use space in SharePoint. There's not enough space sometimes. You'd run out.
Oh, that's a great point too. I forgot about that. I ran into that problem. In OneNote, in the middle of a OneNote development, I ran out of space. Great point. Are there any other tools out there, PMIS, that are out there or any other experience with lessons learned, please? Maybe someone on the call that wishes you had one, but you didn't.
So Shelley is adding that SharePoint is what she uses now, but worried that they keep dropping our applications.
Good point. It's a great point. Microsoft Team Files. That's a good one too. I think the point of it, really, the reason why I asked the question, Larry and everyone that chimed in, I appreciate this. It's again to get your mind moving on the why. Don't just regurgitate the definition of a lessons learned repository or of a lessons learned template or a register. Understand why. Why do you have it? And when you get questions around that, or when you get to the point where you're actually wanting to use one or improve one, you understand what a lessons learned register can enable, right? The PMBOK is an a la carte opportunity. Pick what you need. You're not going to use everything every time, every project. But if you understand some high level concepts, you're really going to be able to select the things and probably repeat some of the tools and templates for multiple projects. So again, it's just to understand you know, where you're at with that. Understand what the lessons learned template is about. So let's talk about closeout meetings. Those are sessions held at the end of a project or phase. Let me do this real quick. Everybody might be wondering, it's 6 o'clock. Why are we not taking a break? I think we have a handful of slides. Are you guys okay?
Yep.
Are we all right to continue, please?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to respect anyone that's saying, why the heck? This Will Garner guy never lets us take a break. Let me get back to where I was at here. Okay, so we're going to continue here. I promise you've got a handful of slides left. So closeout meetings are sessions held at the end of a project or a phase, and they involve discussing the work and reviewing lessons learned. Closeout meetings may include stakeholders, team members, project resources, and customers. They typically follow a formal agenda and may require official minutes to be recorded. Not all organizations or projects require closeout meetings. Some organizations require the minutes from closeout meetings to be completed in full, approved by management, and preserved in a specific manner. I'm looking at a note here in my cheat sheet that in an agile environment, a retrospective meeting is used when closing the project. And again, I'm not an agile guy. Anyone on the call want to challenge that, or maybe is there something very specific to a retrospective in the agile world that we might call a closeout meeting and use as a closeout meeting in the predictive world of things? Anyone want to chime in there that might have more experience with agile?
Just
Retrospective
because
seems.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
Don't go ahead, please. I'm sorry. I think there's a little bit of a delay in the line.
Yeah, Jessica is saying I thought retrospective was at the end of each sprint, which I believe is the case. Yeah.
Okay. So you still have a retrospective at the end? Or are you saying that there wouldn't be one at the end when you're closing the project and an agile execution?
Well, I think in every sprint there's a retrospective.
Okay, perfect. That makes perfect sense. So in this one, it will almost be after, in the context of our discussion today, that would align with the end of every phase, right? Using the same terminology we had, at the end of every phase, there would be this closeout meeting. It's similar to how a retrospective would run in Agile.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the contribution. Okay. Ooh, here you go. So retrospective, the closeout meeting in an Agile project is called a retrospective. It includes the Agile team, the product owner, the key stakeholders. It encourages participants to review what went well, what could have gone better. And the assessment includes the work of the product, the processes, the level of collaboration inside and outside the team, and other areas that influence the effectiveness of product delivery. Is there any more contribution on retrospective, please? Okay. So it's guidelines to close a project or phase. Each phase of the project must be properly closed to ensure that valuable information is safeguarded for future projects. To properly close a phase or project, do the following. Review the project management plan, accepted deliverables, and OPAs, organizational process assets, to confirm that the activities for the project are complete. Also, some organizations and application areas have a project termination checklist that may be useful when closing on a project or a phase. In the Six Sigma world, this is some years ago, we had a template, a literal check the box template, make sure all of these things are taken care of, and that's what they're talking about there. At the end of each phase, You check the boxes, and at the end of the complete project or process, then you'll check all the boxes, and you can ensure that you've had everything completed that's been negotiated through the governance processes. Gather and organize performance measurement documentation, product documentation, and other relevant project records for ease of review by stakeholders. To confirm the project's products meet compliance requirements, release project resources, the update records to ensure that they reflect final specs. Be sure to update the resource pool database to reflect new skills and increased level of proficiency. That's an interesting one. Analyze project success and effectiveness and document lessons learned. Prepare lessons learned reports and a final project report. You obtain the project approval and formal project acceptance, right? Define done. And get the approval that is done. You met everything you need, and demonstrate to the customer or sponsor that the deliverables meet the defined acceptance criteria to obtain formal acceptance of the phase or project. Archive complete set of index records and celebrate the success of the project with the team. I think this one has been on here since I took the exam years and years ago, 15 years ago almost. Celebrate the success of the project. I'm glad they have that. We don't. I know there's one that I will be celebrating when it's done. I can assure you that one. All right. Guys, more contribution. What else do we have here? What are we talking about? All right, so let's look at the close process. This is from the PMBOK. I don't remember what page. I'd have to take a look at what page it was from. But these are the, what is the close project or phase process, right? This is the process of finalizing all the activities for the project, phase, or contract. And during this phase, all invoices are paid, contracts are closed out, project lessons learned are discussed and documented, and any other loose ends wrapped up. And these are the inputs, tools and techniques, and the outputs. And a graphic apparently that makes no value to the slide. What questions do we have about the project closeout, please? What questions, what comments, what complaints? What do we have? You guys good on all this? We have next. I'm seeing some things coming through here on Q that I'm not quite able to catch. Let me see if I can get a look here. Not Q, but
I got it, William.
thank you.
It's annoying to have to deal with when you are a part of phases, from Shelley. Jessica, the celebration is not on the outputs list. I agree. Said holding for funding, and then Shelley gets phase 2.
All right, anyone that provided those want to elaborate a little bit? We've got a few minutes here. Guys, you're normally used to sitting on here for another 45, so let's have some engagement. Let's get some interaction for another 10 minutes or so here. Shelley, you had a couple things that you brought up. Do you want to elaborate on those and see what we can think about?
Shelley or Jessica, is there something that you can add, please?
So my project regularly goes through phases. We have 5 in order to be able to complete the project. And I'm always at the end of one phase holding for it to finish so I can sit there and wait till requesting on funding to complete the rest of the project, which is still pending because I'm just waiting. The closing phase has yet to actually occur for, I'm going to say, a good portion of my projects because they're multiple phase projects that take multiple years over. And I think I'm on year 6 of 8 right now. So they're just, to me, that it's not really a close. It is a pause, right? I haven't really closed anything. We're just pausing for a month while we wait for funding to come through, and then we can start all this stuff up again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those things where you look at this and think about the reality or the pain points that we have along the way. I mean, those would be lessons learned item, interesting. I hope you are able to get that stuff closed up here soon, but obviously there's governance set in place for a reason. There's a reason why they're making you wait. Don't know what it is, but something is driving those decisions, right?
Yeah, it's just cash flow. Ours is 100% cash flow. We are based on, this is how much you can spend for this cycle, and go off and take care of it and don't go over budget, which we have been able to do for the 6 of the 8 years, but we have to wait till next year's funding catalyst goes off for everybody to buy in, to say, yes, we're good to go and we can move forward again.
Shelley, I'll tell you that what you're saying there is obviously total reality, but it's also a great example of, and I think I've heard a few facilitators mention this through the PMP prep, that there's a lot of things about PMI and the PMBOK that may not align with AT&T ways of doing things. Hell, we might say that there's most of the things in the PMBOK that don't seem to align with what we do. Just make sure that you guys, while you're looking, and Shelley, it's such a great example, while you're looking at the pain point of having to wait for one phase to complete, or waiting for one criteria to meet a decision gate to go to the next phase, the big takeaway as you prep for the exam is that you have to wait for all requirements and metrics to be met before you can move on to the next phase. Right. I think that's the big takeaway. Like, okay, I get remember, it's the concept. I get it. Now I hate it, but I get it. I got to check all these boxes and wait for the next bucket of funding to come through before I can do whatever I need to do. So that's my encouragement to you. I'm sorry about the pain. That must really suck. But remember, as you're prepping for the exam, you know what your takeaway is to your experience. So thank you. Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate you. What was the other one that was asking some questions? Let's get some more elaboration on that. Shelley did a great job. Jessica? Was it Jessica?
I was just doing it to be smart. I mean, there's no,
no
documented
celebration.
celebration.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you're right.
It would be nice.
Yeah.
We had like cake every time we close out a phase. Yay, cake.
Oh, no, that's not a bad idea. I kind of like the idea.
Totally online with cake.
Be happy with coffee, celebratory coffee.
That's right. Everything's virtual though, so you'd have to do. I think I finished school recently, and there was a cohort of us that said, "Well, we certainly can't meet up to do anything, but let's celebrate finishing, all this stuff we had to do and getting, all of our writing done, whatever. And so let's have a virtual happy hour." So what we did was we all got our glass of whatever and called in at 5 Central, whatever it was, and just all of us are on video. They said, "Cheers, congratulations." I guess that's where we're at today. That's our celebration. Our virtual celebration is about all we got anymore. So what else do we have? I appreciate the humor. Thank you, Jessica, for adding that. I appreciate that. What else do we have, please?
And William, on the topic of the celebration, not that, that it's, it is critical to make sure you keep your project team members motivated and inspired and engaged with the ongoing project, especially when you hit major milestones. Because I had a project a few years past when I was in a PMO organization that we completed a task of upgrading like 19,000 devices and across our network, and we did it. It was accomplished like 5 months ahead of schedule, and it was kind of a a 20-second thank you on a call, not even, and not even a big to do for all the project team members that were on it, and no mention of it besides like a brief mention on the leadership call, but it was kind of deflating to the team, and I know some team members started to check out a little bit. So it is kind of critical to make sure you make big deals of milestones, especially the way everybody here at AT&T works and the hours we put in. It helps us keep you motivated and inspired for the next steps in the project.
Jeez, what a great point. What a great ad. Golly, that's so true. My goodness, that's so true. All of what you said was true. Yeah, especially, one of the big things about AT&T versus the PMBOK is the PMBOK, I think, I keep thinking like building a space shuttle or something the PMBOK is built on, where you're going and you got these group of people together, you got this one thing that you're building, and, you're going through and you're building it, and you may not ever work with any of these team members again, right? You got this project team put together. At the end of the project, you're saying, hey, here's all the skills that were improved and everything else, and here's all the, all the documentation, everything else. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later. We work projects that we've worked with the same people every day for years and years and years and years and years. And Pat, what you brought up, that they get deflated, you've got to ask these guys to help you out again at some point. Probably a different, maybe even a different project or process. I'm glad that AT&T gives us opportunities, although it doesn't seem like it's much. It's, but it's those opportunities to give that accolade out, give a shout out, give a high five, give something that recognizes something that someone has done above and beyond, and I'm really glad. Those are the celebrations that I think, not at the end of the project. I think if we only did it at the end of the project, Pat, we would lose, like you said, we would lose the motivation. We would lose a lot of things here. Just, for folks that are doing that, I know that just letting them know thank you and their boss know, golly, you knocked it out of the park. I appreciate that. And here's what the result of that is. Man, those things are huge. Huge. Anything else, please? This thing that I have on the screen was a lessons learned template. I pulled it, I cited it. Projectmanagement.com. This is off the lessons learned template that I shared with you. This is actually the front tab of that, identify topics you want to review and analyze, and then you share it in your knowledge database. But really it's a way of, Pat just gave a great one of how you can encourage your team, and you could probably measure the results of that. Here's what happened when I wasn't doing this stuff. All of a sudden I started giving the proper accolades out, and we started seeing some, maybe they go a little bit, they stretch a little bit for something, maybe they can get it this week instead of next. Those types of things start to happen because they really do appreciate you recognizing their effort for a change, this type of a thing. Little celebrations here. And then at the end, again, I've got a project that I feel that's been going on forever, literally forever, that whenever it's done, golly, I know I'm celebrating. What other contribution do we have, guys? We're literally at the end of this. I have nothing else to contribute. Let's do this for the last couple minutes here. Let's go over the learning goals. This is what today was about. Take the final questions, everything that we got here for today. And then you guys will see me. I've got a couple, I think it's leading the team. I've got 3 sessions in the next few weeks here that you guys will be able to get me. You'll be able to get me again. So hopefully everything's okay. So let's look at our learning goals for today. Okay, please. When I assess project needs, complexity, and magnitude to determine the appropriate project, this isn't the right one. I feel like we already talked about this. Plan and manage the scope, plan and manage the budget and the resources, plan, prepare, modify, manage a project schedule based on methodology. I've read this before. Is this the right one for our stinking slide? Establish a project governance structure, and then plan and manage the project closure. What other takeaways do we have from today, please? I mean, is there anything that was an aha moment for anybody on the call? Anything that, you'll be able to, maybe you'll take away and use immediately, right? Is there anything that we have feedback for the next 3 or 4 minutes here? We'll plan on ending at 6:30 Central. Feel free to unmute and just speak up, please. Thank you. Okay. If there's nothing, there's nothing. All right. So you guys, I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Heather, for your support. It was amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Good luck as you move forward. I'll see you in I don't even remember. It's not the closing, but it's the 3 before that you had me for leading the team. Look forward to working with you guys then. Remember to stay focused and do your homework and practice and practice and practice exams. And, you guys have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon. I will end the recording right now. All recording stopped.